Hello and welcome to Church Unusual, the platform where we discuss matters the church. We are looking at church as God created it and what we have become. What's the state of the church? And of course, to do this, we've been looking at Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus walked out of the temple. He departed the temple. But of course, to understand why he departed the temple, we have to look at the historical background that necessitated his actions. To do this, I'm in studio with my husband, and I will allow him to introduce himself.
Hi, Charles OPIYO. Welcome to Church Unusual, and today we really want to look at this environment that has caused us to be where we are today.
Yes, my name is Susan OPIYO, and we are discussing kingdom versus religion. That is where we are. To start us off, maybe you can tell us about the gap that happened between the book of Malachi and the book of Matthew.
Well, there are two environments, and we're going to look at Jesus' story in the context of how it applies to us and the historical background and the parallels. The whole idea is that after the Babylonian captivity, you look at the books of Nehemiah, Malachi, Ezra. The story around those books is that the Jews have now returned. Cyrus has released them.
Yes.
When they return, when you get to Malachi, there's some disconnect with the way the people are introducing God, and God gets silent. We call it the silence of 400 years.
Yes.
When God doesn't speak again since the temple of Malachi, and that's another story, a whole story. But when that gap is created, something very interesting happens. A group of people emerge. In other words, in the Old Testament, there was no Judaism. You know, many Christians today assume Judaism is the religion of the Old Testament.
I think we need to just talk on that.
Yes, Judaism is the religion of the Pharisees.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, when you end up with Malachi, there are no Pharisees.
So the Pharisees emerged in that silent era.
Exactly.
And they came up with their own
They are the ones we
religion,
call the Judaizers.
Okay.
Whenever the Bible uses the term the Judaizer,
Okay.
these are the guys we're referring to. These people are very interesting. They were informed by fear. They were informed by not wanting to go back to Babylon. So they instead of using the normal 248 laws of Leviticus, they added 365.
Wow.
And they made this new whole environment 613 laws. Suddenly, this is why Jesus kept telling them, you put so many burdens on the people.
Yes.
That's why Jesus would say things like, you've made the word of God of no effect by your tradition. And that's why they would query, why don't you keep the tradition of the elders?
So the elders are a creation of man,
Absolutely.
not a creation of God.
Yes,
these are
fear.
not sent ones.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, as we will see, this is the creation of religion.
Yes.
This is the whole environment. So with that as the background, they invented a lot of things. They invented the synagogue. They invented the service, where you go in, somebody gives a psalm, a hymn, you read a scripture, a scroll, and you do all this. Jesus had to actually, to correct the order, he had to step into an order he disagrees with, just to bring order within that order.
So he came in with, into the midst of chaos.
Yes.
Into a system that God did not create.
Absolutely.
And of course, he came in and he did not fight it, but
Yes.
he came into it
Yes.
to change.
Absolutely.
Okay.
He started from there,
Yeah.
then departed. So that's the principle of Jesus departed from the temple.
So when we talk about Jesus departing from the temple, we are
Yes.
discussing that this has become a religion.
Yes.
This has become something that is so different from what
Yes.
God intended.
Yes.
And of course, now Jesus is in this temple where we have Pharisees and their laws.
Yes.
And now he walks out. He departs.
Yes.
Maybe we need to discuss that.
So that's why the whole issue around it. So Jesus steps in, and what he has done is that he has understood that this is not what was intended.
Yeah.
You have turned the house of my father, a house of prayer, into a den of thieves. And then he explains the thieves. The Bible tells us there were buyers and sellers. So that's a whole story
There was
behind
trading
it.
going
so
on.
buyers and sellers are considered thieves
Yeah.
in this environment. So that's a whole story we'll
I think
look
you need
into
to say
later.
that again. In the kingdom, buying and selling,
Yeah.
God sees it as
Thieves.
robbery.
Yes. It's not
Wow.
part of the kingdom. It's a Babylonian model.
Well, sounds like what you're
The
doing
Bible
today.
is called what? The devil is called what?
Yeah.
A thief. What has he stolen? You've stolen the original order
Okay.
and replaced it with another order. You've not stolen things.
So a house of prayer has become the house of trading.
Absolutely. You've turned over a model.
Okay.
Now, when we understand that background, this is the same problem we are dealing with today.
Yeah.
What happened is that when Jesus left, he left us with the ecclesia. That was his church. On this rock will I build my church. And the early church operated that church. But in the gap again, just like Malachi, we have created Christianity.
Yes.
So we are no different. So to create Christianity, we had to create our own brand of new laws.
And I think also when you talk about the scripture, where Jesus said, I will build my church, you said it before, that implies there are other churches.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to build mine.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so what happens, and there's a whole new environment that we create, and the same spirit of the Pharisee, Jesus tells us it's a spirit. He says to them, you are there from the beginning. You killed so-and-so in the Old Testament.
So this
you
is a
killed so-and-so, meaning he's addressing the same pattern that appears in different times.
Okay.
And so the power of this spirit is when there's a silence from heaven. When there is no clear hearing of God, immediately this spirit steps in and creates a system. Now this system is what we refer to as religion. The deceptiveness of it is that it can also call others religion. That's how powerful it is.
Okay.
The Pharisees said Jesus was casting out demons by a demon. You understand?
Yeah.
It has that capacity. So in that environment, we developed something called Christianity, which was not the original model. So under this new brand called Christianity, we have allowed the Pharisees again to give us laws that were never there.
Since Christianity is the thing we know now and we are talking about the church, when you talk of the church, we're talking about Christianity. Maybe we need to look back and ask ourselves, when Jesus came, what did he come to introduce?
Yes.
What did he bring? What was he coming to restore?
Yes.
And like you're saying, it was not Christianity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we even come into what he came to do, we will discuss what came.
Before he came.
Yes, what came? What was this thing that when he left us with something, he dealt strongly with that spirit, left us back in the correct order, but in the gap again, something was created. Now I think we don't have 365 laws. We create them as we go along.
Over 1,000
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As long as we create them, but how do we know this has happened? How do we know there's a disorder in this environment? We need to look at the process from the last correct position, the window of where we've arrived, and then describe what has happened in that window. Then people will be able to recognize the reality.
Yeah.
So I will quote somebody that I like what he said. It's called Richard Halverson. Richard said something very interesting. He said, in the beginning, in the book of Acts, the church was a fellowship of men and women centered around Christ.
Okay.
Okay? When that whole thing moved to Greece, it became a philosophy.
Okay. So when Christ left, he left men and women
centered around his reality. Yes. Well, but this moved to Greece. They've got too much thinking into it. It became a philosophy, a discussion, everything. When it moved from Greece to Rome, it became an institution.
Okay.
I mean, and you can study history, Constantine and the first order of having churches and cathedrals and whatever. Then, when it left there, it moved to Europe. In Europe, it became a culture. That's why we think we are Christians by Christian names.
That is where we got all this, how to dress and how to...
Absolutely.
Okay.
It was transformed into English culture or European culture. So what happened, all the early missionary groups, whether they were the Vasco da Gamas, whether they were the David Livingstones, whether they were whoever you want, you can tell by where they colonized, their brand of religion or their brand of this so-called Christianity was infused into their culture. So that is why when when we grew up, you're told, what is your Christian name? Really what we meant, what is your English name?
Okay, but that's now the culture that came from Europe. Now, when you talk about the different places where this went, you're talking about moves of God.
Absolutely.
That every time God came in again to try and bring into the minds of men, like, this is what I meant. They introduce something different.
Absolutely.
So you say it from the book of Acts, you're talking about households. Men and women meeting.
Meeting around the personality of Christ.
Christ
the
was
character
the center.
of Christ. That was the focus. You move into the Greeks. Greeks were thinkers. Their job is to try and to analyze, to work it out, to calculate, how do we describe this thing? You move it to the Romans. The Romans were smart. They said, this philosophy, you can use it to rule.
Wow.
Take it and go and rule people, create institutions, create systems, create environments to control.
And now instead of having Christ as a center, the institution became the center.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's why suddenly God didn't own the earth, God lived in a house.
Wow.
We moved him to a temple. Let's go to the house of God. Everything changed. We institutionalized
Now we
him.
manage him.
Yes.
Okay.
Then in Europe, we took it into culture. So what happens, the British culture was almost considered to many Africans as Christian culture.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that is why now we have reverse religion
Yeah.
across the earth. You have every African group of people waking up and beginning to say, we also have our own religion. They are responding to British culture. They say, you know, this is the white man's religion. What are they responding to?
The culture.
The culture. They don't understand what they were given was already contaminated. So they are now fighting the contamination with more contamination. Because now, after it left that, it went to America. In America, it's amazing. It became a business.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
In America, it became a business. It was a matter of trading. What you give God, He can give you. He can multiply it. He can increase it.
Is that where we saw the increase of the prosperity gospel?
Absolutely.
Okay.
America was blooming. It was an environment of invention, becoming great.
Yeah.
So God was bumped into the culture of greatness. In the culture of you can make it, mega sizes, mega churches, mega everything. Now, this is our problem. When this whole thing arrived in Africa, see, Richard Havelson left the story there.
Yes.
I now bring my own version. When it arrived in Africa, it took all those things and was added to superstition.
So now it's a hybrid.
Yeah. A combination of everything.
Yeah.
You dress like a European, you talk like a Greek, you behave like a Roman, and you act like an African, and you trade with it.
Wow. That's a combination
That's the
and
products we
total
now have.
confusion. So this religion we are discussing now, it's a total confusion of what God intended.
Completely, but this is what most of us are calling the church.
That's where we were born. That's where we were
you.
brought up. That is the church we know. That is the God we understand.
Yes.
So that means the God we were introduced, most of us, we were introduced to a God who does not exist.
Absolutely.
A creation of man.
Yes.
Wow.
And this God is obscured through many things, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
First of all, it is obscured through witchcraft. Because of, so some people embraced a more powerful witch than the witch in the village. Understand?
The witch in the village is somebody you know who have been passed on from.
Yes.
It's a lineage thing,
After
generational.
All, now there's another witch called Jesus. He's powerful.
And he seems to come from a God we don't know.
And he's come with stuff you don't even know about.
Yeah.
He can package himself in a bottle of oil.
Wow.
Don't you joke?
So he comes in as anointing oil.
And you can use him to destroy every other witch.
Wow.
That's where we came from.
So really what we are embracing is like we're trying to understand our situations.
Yes.
When we can't, we look for a powerful being that can deal with it.
Yes.
Jesus came in and sounded like when you come to him, all your problems will go.
After all, that's what we want. Because after all these people, what are they trying to fix? Problems. In the end, nobody's looking for God.
You're looking for the end of our issues.
End of my problems.
When we go for meetings, for example, and we say that, come to this meeting, bring the sick, bring the poor, bring the dead.
Exactly.
Of course, we call all these people.
Yeah.
Are we going for God or are we going for ourselves?
What was
are
his
we looking
mandate?
for God?
Did he say bring them or did he say go to them?
So now we are calling them, bring them in.
Yes.
And then we say there is this Jesus who will deal with all these issues.
We have the top wizard in the house. You bring all your demonic
activities,
he will deal with them.
So we are saying that when we came into salvation, majority of us came from the platform of my problems. I have this thing I need God to sort for me, and you have promised me that my sickness will go, my problems will go, poverty will go. So really, I was not looking for Jesus. And this is somewhere an important point for us to sit and ask ourselves, how did I get born again? What motivated me? There's somebody else who was told that hell has fire.
Yes.
I don't want to go to hell.
Fire insurance is powerful.
You know?
And they tell you that fire is how many times hotter. So in your head, logic, simple maths. Why would I want to burn? Let me take anything that makes me not burn.
Than fire.
That was the way we came.
Somebody else was told, whatever you're going through in the earth, when you go to heaven, things will be okay. So you did not go to Jesus, you went for heaven. You're not looking for God. You're looking for heaven. So we have to ask ourselves all these things and say, when we talk of church unusual, we are simply saying this is not what God intended. God has a purpose. God has something that he wanted to bring into the earth. But what happens to us? We brought in religion. And that's the religion we are discussing. As we continue discussing this thing, we are saying, ask yourself, am I in this system? Is this what is ruling me? Is this what I'm walking into? That's the purpose of today's show. So we are going to discuss religion and ask ourselves, when we say it came from Rome and went to all these places and came to Africa, what is religion?
Yes.
How do I identify religion?
You see, for all this system to operate where we are, we now have a scenario. You have to maintain this thing. The devil is smart.
Yeah.
All these hybrids we've created, you must create a system. Remember we said the Romans gave us what? A system.
Yes.
Everybody gave you something.
Yes.
So this whole thing has grown. Now to maintain this, religion's power is based on the ability to create a system, but that system must be powerful enough to keep you in an environment that even though you are never arriving, you're fine.
You are okay.
Yes.
You're actually happy in a system that is taking you nowhere.
Yes.
And I think when we talk of this, we are also saying, go back to Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, and see what God created. In chapter 3, the enemy interrupted.
Yes.
This disruption is what birthed religion, because the enemy's intention is never to realize the mandate of God in the earth. That's what we are saying. That whatever we are involved in, today we are simply saying the church has become the hindrance of God's movement in the earth.
Absolutely.
But this church is walking in the name of God. We are actually saying that we are serving God.
Same pattern.
Yeah?
When Jesus walked in, the Pharisees kept challenging him on Moses. And he kept saying, if you knew Abraham, you would know me.
You'd know me, yes.
If you, all these people you're discussing, if you truly knew them. So the picture we have is a strange picture. A friend of mine put it this way.
Yeah.
It's like you've sent someone to prepare people for you.
Okay.
Okay? And then you start branding the story. We have a superstar coming, this fellow is this fellow is like that, you're preparing people. And then the fellow appears when you're still preparing people.
Yes.
And you tell him, you've come too early. Go back.
Let me continue
Because I'm
this.
still enjoying the posture of the brand power.
Yeah.
Why are you taking away my show? When you arrive now, and that's what Jesus did, he arrived when they were still pointing at a Messiah.
They were still looking forward
They were
to.
still giving a big picture and making people go through so many crazy things to prepare. They were creating an economy out of the preparation.
And this is all about controlling
Absolutely.
man. Having control
and
of
this
human
is the
beings.
lie we are still using.
Yeah.
We are still using the lie in religion that there is a place we will get to. We are not yet there.
Yes.
Meanwhile, God has shown up.
But this place we are going to, somebody has to take us. It's also not a place where I'm being given free will, that find the place and walk
You're
yourself
not ready
into that.
yet. You're not qualified.
I'm taking you there.
Absolutely.
So religion captures, puts you in bondage, and now keeps you there telling you, I am the only one who will find the way for you.
Keeps giving you rules, regulations, systems. Because the question is, they were all afraid of going back to Babylon. Who would have rescued them from Babylon? The Messiah. The Messiah comes and the guys are saying, no, keep the rules going. Why would you want to interfere with us now?
Keep our system moving.
Yes, why? Just like the demons, what did they say? You've come to us before our time. Listen, we have programs here. What's wrong with you?
Stop
How can you show up
us
now?
Yes.
Well, no, this is not the time. Why do you have to deal with us before our time? We're still enjoying our time.
So there's something called our time in religion.
Yes.
A place where man so enjoys having power over people.
Absolutely.
I'm taking you somewhere.
I have just replaced God.
So when I hear a sound that sounds like God, I fight it. You're coming too early.
Absolutely.
You're interfering with my system.
Exactly.
My structure.
That's where the issue lies.
Wow.
And until we're able to then look at that whole picture and ask ourselves the questions, when you came into what you're calling church or kingdom, what were you looking for?
That's the good question.
What were you looking for?
That's a good question.
What was offered to you? You know, Jesus had a very, very confusing way of dealing with things.
Yeah.
Today, the way we deal with ministry, we were having a discussion with some friends yesterday. We said if Jesus showed up today, we would crucify him on the spot.
He's come too early. He's interrupting us.
Everything he tells us disagrees with what we know about him. What does he mean? How can he tell us something different?
Yeah.
How can he go to a place where everybody is sick and heal one man and go home? The meeting is not over.
We want to heal more.
Yeah, bring them to the front.
And
how many are they?
And I think also we see Jesus everywhere he wants. He's either telling the man, don't talk about this.
Yeah, don't
tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone.
What do you want as religion?
Don't go and tell anyone. And the fellow, here we do, please put it on Facebook. Show them how many miracles I have done for you.
Wow.
Our statements all start with, when the man of God prayed for me. Meanwhile, Jesus said, do not tell anyone.
So when we are talking about religion, we are saying it's where now man becomes the center.
Absolutely.
God is on the sidelines. And we use the name of God to control the masses.
Absolutely. You know, instead of having a Christ-centered design,
Okay.
we have a man of God-centered design.
Please explain. Please explain.
A Christ-centered design is where everything that is done reflects, looks like, sounds like, operates like Christ. So if I interact with you, it's the same as interacting with Christ. A man of God-centered design does the same thing.
Yes.
If I meet you, I've met your father, my spiritual father.
Okay.
If I met you, I've met your bishop.
Okay.
I've not met Christ.
I've not met God, I've not met Christ.
It's the man of God-centered design. So everything is designed, measured. I've spoken before about the Jesuit model when the Jesuits first came out to protect the Pope. And in one of their edicts, one of the laws said, where the Bible and the Pope disagree, the Pope is right.
Where the Bible
and the Pope disagree, the Pope is right.
Wow.
And that is the new thing we've brought back into the system. It is now the authority of the one heading the religion that goes.
Where he is right.
Yes.
Where we feel the Bible is saying something contradicting our man of God.
Yes.
Our man of God is right.
And the man of God casts Christ and God in a light that they are very threatening. They do not like dealing with everybody.
Yeah.
They deal with him, and if you want to get to the God, you must work well with him. And when you disagree with him, you're in trouble with God.
Wow.
That's a system we've developed.
Wow.
Now, for us to be able to look through this system properly, we have to now begin to unpack what gets grown in this environment. What are the characteristics of that environment? So that somebody can find out, am I in it or not?
Yes, and I think also when we are discussing religion, we are saying this is a system that is trying to cover God. It's actually hindering God from moving. And when we talk of the church today, we are simply saying, listen, people are leaving the church. They're not leaving God.
Yes.
They are actually in pursuit of God. They are looking for God. But they seem not to find him in this thing we have called church. We have packaged God, put him in a building, and told people this is the only place you can find him. So when people come looking for him and they don't find him, we say that people are leaving church.
One of the things, as we tied this down, that is so weird that has been developed. When people grow in the system and get close to the man of God, the first thing that shocks them is like Jesus said in Revelation, is this the man that destroyed in Ezekiel? Is this the one who confused the nations? Yes. They get close, they realize there's no God here. But when they leave, they are so demonized by the same that people believe the devil has just left us.
So this is a system that says, listen, stay here, and if you can't find God, find me. I'm the representative of God. But what we are asking is, there's kingdom that Jesus introduced. There's religion that man birthed, and that religion, we call it Christianity. That is what binds us today. As we continue looking at this, we are saying this is Church Unusual. Stay tuned.